So you started as a janitor, you were making coffee, and then all of a sudden you're running operations.
Yes, sir.
How did you get to where you are?
The way I look at it too is like I've worked my way from the bottom to the top. Focus on your health as much as you can, right? Teach me the rules of the game. Give me a couple minutes to learn the rules of the game, and then I'll win the game.
Hey everyone, welcome to Business Unchained, where entrepreneurs and business owners come together to power up on their journey to greatness.
Bobby Masha is the founder and CEO of Greenridge Wealth Planning. All opinions expressed by Bobby and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinion of Greenridge Wealth Planning. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for any financial decisions. Clients of Greenridge Wealth Planning may maintain positions in any securities discussed in this podcast.
So let me make a formal introduction, okay? I got this guy. He basically came into my life, you know, when we were both really trying to build our own business and make our name, you know, out in the this Somerset, Morris, New Jersey, you know, atmosphere of running small businesses. Interesting thing about this gentleman is he dropped out of college to play guitar and write songs in a rock and roll band while he was working at Rita's Ice and was a janitor and a plumber. And fast forward to today, he's got his dream job in investment banking. He's married, happily married, with a daughter now, 5 years old. I can't believe she's 5 already.
It's crazy.
And when you and I met, it was interesting because it was, you know, trying to figure out business. You had gotten married, gotten divorced. You'd kind of, you know, we talk about successes. We talk about overcoming failures. You know, we talk about a lot here, and you've been through a lot. So I'm looking forward to hearing Mike's story, kind of what inspired him, you know, what got him into fitness and how he grew his confidence. So I'd like everybody to introduce Mike Fischer, J. Michael Fischer. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Talking about the journey, talking about you being super into health now. I'd love to just kind of hear your version, go backward, a little bit about how you got to where you are today, but I'd really like to take a dive into your mindset shift in taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, how you view yourself in business and your goals. And, you know, let's start from the beginning and how you got here.
How did I get here? I've been trying to recently kind of put together my own personal marketing plan as to how can Michael Fischer, you know, or J. Michael Fischer, you know, be an inspirational person in this world. What's funny for me is it all really, you know, started back as a kid, just super insecure with myself, kind of always questioning, you know, what's my place here on this world? And, you know,
where do you think that insecurity came from?
Honestly, it's always been body image for me. It's just been something where I always aspired to be something more, and I could never get there. I grew up in a home that, you know, my dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse. You know, they kind of always drove down, hey, you have to be a certain way. You have to do really well in school. You have to do all these things. And, you know, for me, it was almost like the path was forged for me, and I didn't get to forge it myself. And that was kind of the most important thing, you know, for me personally. What ended up happening for me, unfortunately, was through, you know, I played in a rock band. I did all kinds of, you know, crazy different things. But I would say there was a weekend in time that really kind of shifted for me. My dad had just gotten home from Paris. My dad was in the pharmaceutical industry, got home from Paris. And we, you know, I was getting up, I was working at a bank full-time, going to school full-time. And this was after, you know, years of chasing this rock and roll dream. I finally was on like the kind of straight and narrow path here. You know, my dad said to me, he goes, you know, it's interesting. He said, what do you think your life goal would be? And I said, honestly, I just want to be a husband and I want to be a father. Like that's really, really, really important to me.
How old were you at that point?
I was probably 27 at the time. So like a little bit of a late start, right? Like I would say this start for me was when most kids would be just graduating college, right? This was for me 5 years later because I had chased, you know, what was, you know, very important to me in the rock and roll dream. And, you know, my dad said, you know, I really feel like where you're heading now is more in the direction and the trajectory of what you really want to achieve in your life. And, you know, crazy. And I said, oh, thanks, Dad, you know, kind of awkward interaction. And then all of a sudden I leave, I go to work. And before I left, he said, I'm just really, really, really proud of you. And, my dad didn't say that to me that much, but for some reason at that moment, he said that to me. The next day, my sister was in grad school. My dad went out to see my sister because she was really struggling with school. And my sister was not so much struggling in school, just she had a lot of anxiety about different things. And my dad said, you know what? The next couple months are going to be really tough. But once you get this degree and you become a doctor, he goes, everything's going to get so much better for you. He goes, I'm telling you, all this hard work's going to pay off. Bobby, that Monday morning, my mom screamed for me, 5:00 in the morning. My dad was dying in his bed. And we tried to resuscitate him. We tried to do everything that we could. And we lost him. And it was like the biggest mindset shift for me in my life. And I said, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's not something I wish on anybody, at all. But for me, it was, once my dad passed away, it was almost like I was born again, right? And all these years that I had spent kind of, not being confident in myself, being, depressed, kind of filled with anxiety, I just said like, oh my God, this is so short. It's so fleeting. I got to do everything that I can to craft the most meaningful life possible. So that was really where it really started for me, like this whole journey that I've been on now.
Where were you? Because your dad passed before we knew each other.
Yeah, probably right before. Yeah.
And, I remember this, you never told that story to me, but you did say, lost my dad.
Yeah.
You were determined to go down whatever path it was that you were picturing for yourself. You were determined. And I think most people at that point in life, in their late 20s, they see a lot of friends getting married and things like that. Why commercial banking? Why did you go in the direction that you went into?
It's actually really funny the way it kind of all worked out. I had a little bit of a taste of banking, I guess you would say. I was working while I was in school before I started working at actually at the bank itself. I was working at Starbucks while I was going to school, and I would sit there and I would make drinks very well for all the business people that came in. Like I'd make it so perfect so that when you got your Starbucks, you were just like, God damn, that's a good cup of coffee. And this guy came in and he'd come in every day and I'd make his drink just perfectly. And he finally said to me at one point in time, he said, hey, can I just talk to you for a second? I goes, sure. And he goes, you make these coffees like you're making $1 million a year. And I was like, well, if you're going to do anything, why wouldn't you do it the best? And he's like, so what are you doing with your life? And I said, I'm going to school full time and I work here at Starbucks. He goes, well, how'd you like to come work for me? And that was my first time that I got into working for an actual business. And basically what I did was glorified secretary, but I pre-underwrote residential mortgage deals. And that got my first taste of, working with actual customers to allow them to achieve whatever, that dream of home ownership, right? And once I started to see that, that's when I was like, okay, cool. Okay, I can help people, right? And that's kind of where, basically everything in my life has come from, outside of that pivotal moment with my dad was, just trying to have this give first mentality, right? To give people what they needed to achieve whatever goal it was. So ended up not working out on the residential mortgage side. This was right around that 2008, 2009, time with the whole financial crisis.
Great time in finance.
Oh yeah. Great time. And then I ended up I said, okay, I'm going to school. I went to a bank and I said, I really want to be a customer service rep. And they said, well, we don't have any customer service rep roles, but we have a teller job. And I said, okay. I had been a janitor before in a school for for a summer. I had rebuilt alternators on a assembly line for a summer job. Like I've had some pretty shitty jobs, for lack of a better word, and really shitty jobs, janitor and plumber, right? Both. And then I ended up, having the opportunity to work at a bank, and I said, okay, I'm just going to do this again. Like I'm making $1 million a year, and I worked at the bank. made sure my drawer was counted right. I made sure I held the door for everybody that came in. And then I finally ended up 7 months later, I became a customer service rep, became one of the top selling customer service reps. I was able to cross-sell different accounts. And the senior lender of the bank that I worked for kept his safety deposit box in our branch. And every day he'd walk in, I'd say, "Hello, Tom, how are you today?" Get the door for him, blah, blah, blah. And I finally built up the courage to say, "Hey, I want to work for you. What do I have to do?" And he was like nobody had ever asked him that before. But I was like, "Well, what's the worst that's going to happen?" You could say no. And he said, "Hey, well, I've been seeing you're one of the top, selling people here, blah, blah, blah. How'd you like to be a management trainee?" And I said, "I'd like that, but I know I don't want to do these different things in the bank. I really like lending." Secretly, I had talked to, my branch manager, and I said, "Who makes the most money at the bank?" And they said, "Besides the president, commercial lenders do." And I said, "That's what I want to do." So that's really where it came from. But that's how I got my start. And I ended up spending, instead of being a management trainee and getting into, financial advisory or treasury or this or that or the other thing, I went right into credit. And I spent 2 years in credit as an analyst, learned all the skill set to be able to see what was a good deal, what was a profitable deal for the bank. And then I just kind of worked my way up from an analyst to a junior banker to a vice president to.
Dude, it's so interesting because nobody has the patience these days. It's almost like there's a sense of entitlement, especially in your space right now, right? iBanker, typically it's guys who have always been in a mindset of like, I'm a winner, let's win.
Yeah.
Come out of school, going after these big jobs. That mindset usually doesn't allow them to go, "You know what? I'm going to fucking make coffee. I'm going to make the best coffee I can.
Yeah.
You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go work for this bank and I'm just going to open up the door. I'm going to be the best that I can." And that's really working your way from the bottom. That's like working your way from the mailroom mentality. And like you said, coming from your mom and your dad are successful. Dad's a doctor. Mom's a nurse, and having this, these guidelines set for you where it's like, you need to meet our criteria of becoming successful to be able to step back. What do you think allowed you to be so humble to take a step back like that and work to that capacity?
It's not as popular these days as it once was, but I was always involved with scouting, in the church. I'm an Eagle Scout. Most people, of course, you're an Eagle Scout, J. Michael. But, that's one thing for me. It's always just having that kind of giving mentality and being super, super humble. For me, it just came from I was always humble because I wasn't very secure in my own skin, number one. But then number two, it was just having that mindset of giving first, right? And everything that I've done, and I would say all of the success that I've ever had in my life always comes from that give first mentality.
So I'm going to fast forward a little bit because where I see the major difference, because I've always known you as being humble, always known you as being a giver, great guy. The confidence thing has always been something where you and I had spoken about early on in terms of like, I just need to, and I don't have the confidence, and I'm building up the confidence.
Yeah.
But when I saw you the day that I walked into my conference room and you were sitting there, you were a different guy. The way you carried yourself, the fact that you've worked so hard on your body. And then you and I started to have some conversations around that element of your life. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper and go into how you got so focused and passionate about your health and your regimens.
One thing I would say about my, just to, go back to my dad, which will help kind of, put this all into perspective. What was crazy about my dad passing was, my dad had an 8-pack. Like my dad did the Florida Ironman. Like we're talking, what is that? 120-mile bike ride, 2-mile swim in the ocean, and a full marathon. Like my dad was a beast. Did that at 55 years old and then dies at 57.
Jesus.
That's pretty crazy, right? So for me, I was like, okay, if he died at this age, for me personally, I was like, I have to make sure I can dial in, my health. So it was something that I always did, but I almost felt like a fraud when I did it because, I would be the guy that would always be on a diet. I would work out 6-7 days a week, an hour and a half plus a day, but I never had the body to be like, oh, that guy's the guy that works out 6 or 7 days a week. It was like the strangest thing. So what I always say with everything is I've always invested in, one thing I've realized is investing in coaching or investing in some sort of education to get something right. It shortens the path of knowledge, right? You hire a coach, you spend money, and then it shortens the path to learn how to do it. So I hired a coach to help me get abs. That's literally what I did. I said, I just want to get abs for the first time. And what I realized, from doing that, it wasn't as complicated as possible. I just had to really put together a strategic plan to get there, right? And through doing that and then achieving that, now I've been able to do that with, a lot of other things in my life. But that's the one thing that I did. And once I learned how to kind of get my physique in check, then that insecurity, gets taken away. Because I don't think people realize, or people that were in my life or you or, anybody really realized. And I think there's a lot of people that deal with this. They just don't say it, but people are super insecure in their body, right? And if you can overcome that, it really 10x's your life, right? Because it's a real drain on people. So I'm just constantly chasing like whatever the next thing is. And this last May, I got down to 7% body fat. I mean, completely ripped out of my mind. I never thought that I could be that guy. Never thought in a million years that I could be that guy. And now it's like, okay, I did this at 42. I know I'm going to be even better at 52 or 53. So,
well, what's interesting is, talk a lot about different mindsets, right? And, when you're talking to people, and you're watching these podcasts and you're listening to, to ways to improve yourself. And I think we've all kind of found ourselves down some rabbit hole or another. But the general sentiment is like, you get into certain levels of successes and you all of a sudden get this imposter syndrome, right? Do I really belong here? This is going to fall apart. Am I really smart enough to do this? This is never going to work out. I mean, you get to this point where you start questioning and doubting your successes. And one of the interesting thing that I heard was, if you go to Harvard, imposter syndrome is greater than if you go to University of Texas. Because people who become more and more successful, that becomes part of what ends up happening, right? You starting into this mindset of like, oh my God, do I really belong here? And what they found is when they start to look a little bit deeper in terms of people who anticipate that they're going to be success, they become super successful. When they actually look at their self-confidence, the more and more they build their own self-confidence, the less and less that comes into play. And the more they can break through that next barrier. So I think a lot of us deal with self-confidence, and it's not success that ultimately determines how confident we should be. It's really when we look inside at ourselves, are we happy and do we feel good with who we are and what we have accomplished?
Besides giving a lot, giving as much as possible, I'm also very grateful. If you haven't read the book, Conversations with God really kind of changed the game for me. Not that I'm an overly religious person, right? But they talk about prayer, and it's, just being thankful and being grateful for everything that I have. So, this morning, get in my cold plunge, 3 minutes. I get out of the cold plunge. I look into the sun. I close my eyes and I just thank God or whoever's up there, right? I thank this higher power for everything that I have. And, to make me an instrumental part of this world and to serve, my family and my friends as best I can. So, for me, what's next, from here is I'm going to keep getting better, physically and mentally. And the more that I pay attention to that first, then my family and my craft and everything that I do work-wise, I'm just going to continue to, just continue to get better every day, a little bit better every day.
There's always a starting point to this. And I want you to dive a little bit deeper into your health and, the path that you took, because it was an interesting one, right? You diverted off of your job, your mission. You got involved with another company, Tell us a little bit about some of the routines that you've picked up and some of the mindsets that you've picked up, the mentality around your, your body through that endeavor.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I joined this program, I did very, very well in it, right? There was certain things you had to do on a daily basis, checking in, for them, it was basically making sure you're working out a couple times a day. Working out, a couple times a week, getting a minimum of 10,000 steps, tracking your sleep and, eating in a, let's say a controlled way.
Did they give you like a playbook?
They give you
go do it yourself, or was it
no. They give you a full playbook of what you need to do, right? And I think it depends on
is it self-motivated, or do you have
a coach?
Okay,
you have a coach that kind of gives you the exact plan. Like, hey, Bobby, we need you to hit 10,000 steps a day. You need to hit this many calories and this much protein. It depends on how.
Drill sergeant style, like I'm calling you up at 10 and I'm going to make sure you got it done. Like what did it look like?
No. The one thing that I learned when I was, involved with this company, and it's something that I took away with life, is like, you can only meet people halfway, right? And with this, it's not going to be like, you better do this now. Like if you're not going to take the responsibility to do some of the work, like you probably shouldn't be doing this, right? Like if you need somebody screaming in your face, like you really need to get yourself checked before, you need to have that mindset to say, I am choosing to do this. This is a choice that I'm going to make, right? So it's meeting someone 50-50, not 51-49, right? So you have to have the mindset of, hey, I'm going to at least put in what I need to, put in to do this. So they give you a basic layout of a plan that you have to do and check in every day and say, hey, did I do these things? Then once a week you come through and you do it. But for me, an expression that I've said for many, many, many years now is teach me the rules of the game. Give me a couple minutes to learn the rules of the game, and then I'll win the game. And that's the mentality that I had when I went into this. So I did exactly what they said for me to do for 90 days. And I was able to drop some weight. But I mean, most people don't really, when they see like where I am now, or they see a picture of me from then to now, that's not a 90-day transformation, right? It's stripping some fat off, and then it's building muscle, and then it's learning to maintain that. So a lot of that is just, bigger lifestyle changes. That works for me in my personal routine. Sometimes I have to be off with it, right? But it's coming up with these kind of daily routines that you like.
So you'll fast the entire day and only eat dinner?
Yeah.
How long did it take before your body was able to adjust to that? Because I think that a lot of people will be like, I get hangry.
Yeah, people say a lot of different things. I mean, so we were just joking around because I have like my magic, drink that I drink. But, most people just need, minerals, basically, salt, sodium, magnesium, things like that. If you're getting a good like electrolyte supplement throughout the day, I happen to add a couple essential amino acids and things like that in there, like the building blocks of protein, that
won't break your fast.
That does not break my fast.
Okay.
No. And so that for me, it's not so much about, yes, there's a lot of benefits from fasting. There's a lot of different things that there's benefits of it. But for me, it's more, I can optimize my time more by not taking the time to eat. When I do eat, I want to eat a big meal. I want to feel full and satiated. I don't want to pick on a little bit of this and a little bit. Because if you said right now, like, hey, you want to have a little bit of that trail mix over there? I'd say, hell yeah, I'll have some of that trail mix. But then I'd want to eat the whole entire bag. Like that's just the way that I am. Whereas I'd rather say, okay, no, I'm good. I'm going to do the podcast with Bobby. I have to get back in the car. I got to work on the ebook that we're working on collectively as a team right now today. I get these things done. And then, tonight at dinner, I'm going to be done. We're hosting a webinar this afternoon that we're getting on. And then when I can finally spend the time with my wife and my daughter to sit down and be done with my day, I can sit there and actually use food as like a celebration, right? With my family to sit down and enjoy it. So that's what I do personally. And then maybe I eat a little bit of something before I go to bed.
Now, how did you battle through some of because it's not easy to change how you operate, how you eat. What were some of the struggles that you had early on when you said, all right, I have this playbook, I have this regimen, I know the game, I know the rules of the game. Now it's time to win. If it were only that easy, right? What were some of the things that you did to get from starting line to being competitive in the race?
I've become friends with a gentleman named Kyle Newell, aka the Panda Man. He's pretty famous on social media. He's big in the fasting space. Really brilliant fitness guy. He says something: do what you say you would do. And it sounds so simple to me, but that's just the way when I struggle with anything. This weekend I'm training for this half marathon. I had to do 10 miles, and at like mile 8, you're like, well, I got a good workout in. Like I could probably but it wasn't 10. Like for me, it's like whenever I struggled, it was I just have to do what I say. I would do. I don't know.
For me, it's verbalizing. So
Okay.
if I verbalize what it is that I'm going to do, like if I'm sitting here and I say to you guys in the room, I said, listen, this is my goal. This is what I'm going to do. My job is to keep reiterating that, because I now am holding myself responsible, because I don't want to look like an asshole.
Yeah.
Because it's not just looking like an asshole to you. It's looking like an asshole to myself, because I didn't say what I didn't do what I said I was going to do. And I've seen a lot of successful people that take a step back. They maybe haven't taken total care of themselves. They have done like a half-assed job because they've focused on business, and they're starting to realize, you know what, I'm getting a little bit older. I'm actually getting successful. I need to start focusing on me. And it's amazing that when you start to take that time, energy, and effort, and you put it back into yourself, how much more that shows up in your life in different ways.
Absolutely.
How has your life been changing? How do you see the future of J. Michael Fischer as you continue down this path of taking care of yourself and keeping your mindset straight? And how has it changed just, since you've done the coaching, just to kind of give some perspective of like your life?
Yeah, well, now the cool thing is I've had the opportunity now to coach and to lead. I mean, the one thing that we really didn't get into, but I ended up helping run that fitness company, right? I was chief operating officer of the company for several years. And then when the opportunity...
So you started as a janitor, you were making coffee, you ran them, and then all of a sudden you're running operations.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's just what I do.
Seems like a theme.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to do all of these things. And, as I continued, down this path, I then, I had this opportunity come up to, where I was crushing it with the commercial banking world. Like you basically said, here's your goals for the year. I was able to meet my goals and then help other people in my team meet their goals by just referring business. And then when this opportunity came up to become an investment banker, it's crazy. It's almost like combining all of the things that I love, right? Like I've worked so much on personal development. I've had an executive mentor, Charles Scott. Shout out Charles Scott. He is one of the most influential people in my life that I still work with on a weekly and monthly basis. But I realized that through my experience in what I did to build my own, self, I could then transcend that into my life's work, right? So I was able to combine like my love of personal development and coaching with my understanding and love of finance and working with business owners to help them achieve a goal, right? So now with what I'm trying to do now is to kind of separate myself in this market of investment bankers that have the Harvard educations or, whatever, highfalutin education that's out there, right? Is I'm trying to be able to sit there and be able to help business owners maximize not only the financial value of their company, but also the personal value of it as well, right? Because a lot of people, a lot of business owners, their identity is completely wrapped up in whatever business that they're in. And that's the one thing that I can take from my coaching experience and my personal development experience is to really help them create an identity outside of that business, right? So if they do decide to exit the business, grow the business, right? It's not something where they're going to lose something necessarily, right? It's going to hopefully bring out the best in them to figure out whatever's next on the journey for them.
Well, it's interesting because you went from helping basically fund companies to getting to the point to merge, acquire. They were in the building phase, And now you're on the strategy side to say, okay, what are the things that you need to do to hit your revenue goals, to hit your valuation? Like you said, you started from the ground, you worked your way up. So you've seen a lot of different iterations of how people have failed, and you've been through it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and the way I look at it too is like I've worked my way from the bottom of the bottom, to the top, right? So I've learned to deal with all different types of people. I've seen all different types of problems, like the problems that occur in the mailroom of the business, right? Where sometimes the CEO and the executive team aren't seeing what's kind of going on here, which has kind of given me the ability to really,
well, it's a different perspective too, right?
It's a totally
different when you're working with these business owners and you're coaching them and you're having these conversations, you have a wider perspective, I would say, than most.
For sure. And I mean, I think with a lot of, what a lot of business owners, need more than anything is they need someone, I'm not saying a psychologist or, whatever they need. They need someone that's a sounding board that can be there with them to really talk about, if things are good, if things are bad. But what I always say is what's the end goal, and then how can we, work our way back, right? And that's why, with what I'm doing now, it's like, the biggest moments in a business owner's life, right, is when they either start or they sell or they decide to really grow their company. Like this is like some of the biggest decisions they're ever going to have in their life, right? So I think by bringing in, the coaching and the mentality that I've really worked on, it really helps them get to, the ideal result at the end.
Do you find yourself working in a certain segment of or certain industry, or where do you gravitate to most?
It's funny, right? I go back to where, in commercial banking, right? I was always a generalist. There's a lot of banks out there now, they have people that are focused on the beverage, they just do beverage or they just do manufacturing. And the one thing for me is I'm more drawn to people than I am drawn to a particular business, right? So usually I get involved with a business because of my personal relationships that I have, right? And I think that, for me, I don't really want to be someone that's super hyper focused in one business, especially on the M&A side, right? Because, hey, there might be a certain company that they're the best, company to sell a manufacturer, right? But what I've found is like they typically go to the same people to then acquire the companies, right? Instead of taking like a real broad approach and process to it, right? Because so as a generalist, that's always kind of worked out better for me.
Do you find that a lot of the people that you worked with in the past who've experienced who you are, how you operate, your MO, are the same ones that you're talking to now in these conversations? And how have you bridged your prior experience in banking into this new experience in banking? Did you have to start all over again, or do you find, where do you find yourself in terms of?
I don't necessarily need to start all over again. I mean, for me, I think that everybody just needs to do. We're so caught up in the everyday, right? And we're so caught up in like all of these different things that we do. I always recommend to people, and this is what I do on a weekly, even daily basis, right? Is I just take a step back. I give myself the room to think, the space to think, and think, okay, how can I achieve what I want to achieve? So what I've done is I've always just maintained a really strong network. But for me, it's like one of those things where it's, as soon as somebody talks to me about something, I'm always talking to people. And, I had a good friend of mine that runs one of the largest hormone optimization clinics in the country call me up and say, hey, I really need to do something, good for my employees. What should I do? I'm thinking maybe a 401k, some sort of ancillary benefit that we can get to make it a little stickier. So I instantly say, hey, I got to introduce him to Bobby, right? Or I got to introduce him to this person, right? So for me, what I've done is I'm just continuously a helpful resource to people. So I don't reinvent myself. Did I have to learn the rules of engagement as to what an investment banker does to get through the process? Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have to learn anything that you do, right? for the first time. But what I've done is just had that giving mentality where I've just, that's a situation. And then they're like, well, what are you doing these days, Michael? Well, this is what, I happen to help people either grow and expand their company through acquisition or exit the company. Okay. Well, if I'm constantly that helpful resource that helps them with everything else that they need to do, well, when they do eventually want to go exit, who are they going to call? The guy that they can trust for their, their best interests. Like, I'm not going to make any money by sending this person to this person, but I can connect people. I've said to other, business owners that I know, hey, or I've said this to you before, or Luciano, or anybody here, is I say, hey, if you have a lending, customer that's working with the bank right now, and they're getting a new line of credit and they get a term sheet, send it over to me. I'll review it. I'll help you poke some holes in it, maybe beat up the bank a little bit to get a better result for your client. I don't get anything out of that. That's just me paying it forward as much as possible. So that's what I've done with my network. And now it's just kind of crafting the messaging so people know kind of what I'm doing now. And just that's the way I've kind of gotten into this. But I didn't expect to be able to be super successful, with it right off the bat. But I have to give myself the grace, right, that I have a good track record of, moving up in the world from janitor to.
I wanted to learn a little bit about your journey, so I appreciate you sharing everything that you shared today. I would say from those, those takebacks, is there anything that I'm missing? If you were talking to somebody who said, "Hey, listen, how did you get to where you are?" What are the few things that I might be missing in that?
I think it really comes down to, three big components for me is focus on your health as much as you can, right? If you can get your body in a place where you feel genuinely good about yourself, you don't ache, you're genuinely healthy, that's just going to optimize everything in your life. The second thing would be to give before you get anything. Give before you get. Just try to give as much as you can to people, whether it be advice, whether it be referrals, whether it be, just even a text just to say like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, like, you're important to me. And, I think about you a lot, and I just think you're great. Like little things like that, just that giving mentality. And then the third thing is really give yourself the time and the space to really think about what's the ultimate version of you outside of anything else, outside of what your family thinks of you or what your family thinks you should be, what the business community or anybody thinks. What does Bobby Massia really want to be at the end of the day? Like, who does he really want to be? And focus time on working towards that every single day. And I think the combination of those three things, I mean, you'll 10x your life.
So what you want to be in terms of how do you want to show up? How do you want to present as who you are?
Absolutely.
Is that the direction in which you're
absolutely
aiming?
I mean, for me, it's, and I've told you guys before, I'm working on my first book right now. It's vitality. That's for me is what I'm chasing, right? Vitality. And the book's, the 5 dimensions of vitality, right? It's, if you can achieve that vitality where it doesn't seem like it's work anymore, life just, it's like the music is playing in the background. Everything is just kind of going with the flow. Everything's good. There's nothing really bad about it. It's just every day feels good. That's what I'm chasing every day. So that's what I would be working towards.
Or even just if you say you're going to do it, just do it.
That's
or even just the mentality of like, if you're not really in the space where you can be what you want to be or do what you want to do, pull up your fucking pants and get to work and start at the bottom and build your way up.
Absolutely. I think the thing is for me is it goes back to that, like, this life is so short. And I think that's where people have this like midlife crisis. They realize like, oh my God, I'm technically what could be halfway through my life, right? So I got to figure out something now. I think what it really comes down to is there's so much going on in this world. Why not live a good life? And that really comes down to just do what you said you would do, but make sure you take the time to actually visualize and think about who you want to be in this world and what do you want to be known as in this world, and focus as hard as you can on that. And it will literally 10x everything else in your life. your relationships will get better, your business will get better, your health will get better.
Well, I think because we're so clouded with the rest of the bullshit that's going on, we're constantly bombarded with information. It's also a little bit of going back to the basics of just, living.
Absolutely.
Whatever way it shows up, I like to keep promoting it. I think it's great. And I love what you've accomplished with yourself. And I love the fact that you walk into a room and you're holding court in my office looking like Dolph Lundgren. I'm like, is that fucking Michael Fisher? Holy shit. Well, dude, I appreciate your time. I know you have a busy day. You got to run 5 miles in, within the next 45 minutes to get that started. And then we've got a webinar later on that you're going to be part of. So, before we part ways for now, any remarks that you'd like to leave to our audience?
I would say, hey, craft yourself a meaningful life. Be intentional about crafting a meaningful life. Do something that you love, chase vitality, and just keep getting better every day.
All right. That's a wrap. J. Michael Fisher, thank you for coming. Appreciate you, man.